I'd like to call to order the April 2nd Planning Commission meeting for the City of Wilmington. If you'd all please remove all military caps and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Attorney, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Before I read the preamble, I would just ask my peers and myself that as we go through this agenda tonight or any, subsequent agenda, if we have any, as we have had in the past, if there's anybody thinks they have a conflict of interest, call it out now and we'll deal with it. So, assuming none, we'll move forward. Have to read the preamble. The Planning Commission advises City Council on applications for rezoning, land development code amendments, street closures, and long-range plans and policies. The Commission holds legislative hearings, meaning that anyone wishing to speak on a request may do so. The Commission issues a recommendation based on consistency of the request with the intent and purpose of the Land Development Code and consistency of a request with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and other relevant adopted plans and policies. All matters requiring Commission action shall be presented to the Planning Commission by the staff and the applicant. In a situation where the staff is the applicant, there will only be one presentation. City staff will make the first presentation, the applicant will make the second. Both presentations are 5 minutes in length. To maintain order, all presentations shall proceed without interruption unless the Commission desires to ask questions of either the city staff or the applicant. From a public hearing perspective, we will open a public hearing for those physically present wishing to speak on an item. Those in favor of an item shall be heard first, followed by those opposed by an item. Both parties will be allowed 10-minute time limits to express their views. Ms. Painter, are you the timekeeper? Thank you. So I can actually go to the next one. All groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or similar associations desiring to comment are asked to appoint a spokesperson to present their concerns or point of view to the Commission on each agenda item. Public has been encouraged to submit their comments in writing via a web-based form to the City of Wilmington's website. All comments received prior to 3 p.m. were forwarded unedited to the Planning Commission. And Amy, my understanding is we just had one comment. Okay. All comments received will be delivered to City Council when the item advances. All comments received will be made available to the public if requested. Voting. All votes will be voice votes after proper motions are made, and the chair will determine the outcome of the vote and the action moving forward. From an appeals perspective, any appeals that receive any items that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the City Council. Any appeal should be in the form of a letter submitted to the City Clerk within 10 days of tonight's hearing. Any item that is appealed will tentatively be heard by City Council at their May 20th meeting. Having said all that, let's move on. First item of business is approval of the minutes from March 5th. I'll wait a second and ask if anybody has any adjustments they want to make. Everybody looking good? Everybody looking good? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the minutes for March 5th.
Second.
And I have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All against, no? Okay, the motion passes. Let's move to new business. The first item tonight is a conditional district rezoning. Property containing 2.11 acres located at 710 North Kerr, or Carr, depending on your preference, Avenue from R10 medium density single dwelling district to MD17 conditional district, high density multiple dwelling residential district, and Zach Smith will overview the item for the Commission.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This is public hearing number 1, conditional rezoning of 710 North Kerr Avenue. The site is located along North Kerr Avenue and New Center Drive and contains approximately 2.11 acres. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request, as well as the existing conditions of the subject property. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property along New Center Drive and Marjoram Drive. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property along North Kerr Avenue. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. Residential uses are located to the north, south, east, and west of the subject property. The site is currently zoned R10, medium density, single dwelling district. The site is bordered to the north and south by R10 and R7 to the west. The subject property is also bordered to the east by property located in New Hanover County's jurisdiction and zone R15. The applicant proposes to rezone the subject property to MD17 CD, high density multiple dwelling conditional district for 48-unit senior housing development. The maximum density for MD17 is 17 units per acre. The applicant proposes a density of 22 units per acre. Density may be increased to 36 units per acre if at least 10% of the total number of residential units satisfy workforce housing rent limits for a period of at least 15 years. All units for this project will be dedicated as affordable senior housing, which meet the workforce housing rent limits established by the code. The project consists of one building with a mix of 28 one-bedroom and 22 bedroom units for a total of 68 bedrooms. Vehicular access will be provided to the site from a driveway located along Marjoram Way. The minimum parking required would be 24 off-street parking spaces. The maximum parking allowed would be 132 off-street parking spaces. The site plan proposes 48 off-street parking spaces. In front of you are conceptual elevations of the proposed development. Here are more conceptual elevations of the proposal. The site is located in a designated live-work innovation zone area of opportunity on the growth strategies map. Dispersal and production of affordable and workforce housing units and senior housing units should be promoted throughout all areas of the city. The development of accessible housing for residents with disabilities should be encouraged. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public's interest. Staff recommends conditional approval. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here as well.
Anybody have any questions of staff? I just have one question, Zach, on your table 3.5.3b, estimated trip generation. I mean, I know how you guys do, you compare it from existing code to new code. I mean, reality is you're gonna, this would suggest you're gonna add 514 trips, new trips, because nothing's there today, correct?
There's a single family dwelling there currently. Let me pull up my chart here.
And if this is for the applicant, say so, and I can ask, because I'm going to ask him the same question anyway, but go, I'd like your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, when we went through pre-TRC, WMPO reviewed this as well, and a TIA was not required.
Okay.
So staff believes that the traffic impact will be minimal.
Okay. Again, anybody else? Okay, Zach, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Adams.
Are either of these roads DOT roads?
Not sure off the top of my head.
Yes, they are.
Thanks.
Sorry. So both of them are? Both roads? I guess is the answer. Okay. Okay. Zach, thank you. Could we ask the applicant to step forward, please?
Hello, my name is Jake Gill. I'm with Wallet Communities. We are the proposed developer for the site. And I did have a little presentation. I think some of it may be a little repetitive based on what Zach and the staff have shown. But I'll go through it real quickly and then I'll get to any questions you all have. Let me see if I can. Okay. So we've proposed the project is called Onyx Place Apartments. It is a 48-unit senior 55-plus affordable housing community. I think first I'll go through just kind of a little bit about our company just to get everyone a little bit more familiar with Wallet Communities. We have been around for 6 decades. We are based out of Columbus, Ohio, but recently have started expansion into North Carolina just based on the need throughout the state. Currently, we are active in Midwestern states like Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, as well as Kentucky and North and South Carolina. Overall, we've developed over 200 communities and 14,000 units in our 6+ decades in business. And these are just some of the sample projects that we've worked on. We are fully integrated, so we have an asset management team that makes sure that our project is functioning over time and that maintenance issues are taken care of over time. We do have an in-house GC that we work with very closely to make sure that the construction costs are honest and that we are good neighbors during the construction process. And then my colleague and I, who are here tonight, work for the development side of things to secure the financing and the tax credits to ultimately build the project. And then I did include some sample projects that we have done. This one is in North Carolina. This was a pretty strong partnership in Chatham County and Siler City. We were able to partner with the city who donated the land for the project, and then the county provided some soft funding to keep the rents lower. This one is a 72-unit family development, 1, 2, 3-bedroom units, so it's going to be slightly different than the one that's proposed on New Center here in Wilmington. But these are just some of the renderings. It did finish up construction last year, and it is fully leased up at this point, so leased up in about 3 or 4 months. This is another project that's just south of Cincinnati and Kentucky. This one probably be a little bit more in line with what is being proposed for the site here in Wilmington. Ours is 4 stories, but slightly less unit counts. But it is similar. It's an interior corridor building. There will be an elevator in Onyx Place as well. And the amenities are pretty similar to this one as well. And that's just some of the interior design elements of it. And then to Onyx Place, I think most of this Zach mentioned. We do expect construction commencement to start in May 2026 is kind of our targeted date. The process for this, we have to submit our full application to the state agency for tax credits. That is due on May 9th. And then from there, they will award the project in August. And then once it's awarded its tax credits, it's fully a go, and we will start the full site plan review with the city at that point. For this particular project, we do have a multi-purpose room. There is a fitness center in the building, a business center, laundry facilities, in-unit laundry hookups as well, and then we have multiple seating areas throughout the property as well. And this is just kind of a colored site plan of the development. And then Zach already showed this image. And then this is just kind of what we've done so far. I think this is kind of the second step in the process, meeting with you all, hoping to get approval for the conditional rezoning. And it kind of highlights some of the major ticket items, either through permitting, site plan review, and then financing. So and that's pretty much it. I don't have any other. And then, well, I guess we did get a support letter from the Cape Fear Housing Coalition. We did do a presentation to them shortly after our community meeting back in February, and they were unanimously voted to support the project, which we greatly appreciate. So, but that's kind of the essence of what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Can you back up about 2 or 3 charts where you have the colored picture of the, right
This
there?
one?
Yeah. It was made mention earlier that you'd have, again, keep me honest if I've got it right or wrong. Was it 48 off-street parking or 48 on-street parking? What's the proposal?
It is 48 parking spaces.
48 parking
Yeah.
spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just piggybacking on that question, and your developments in other cities and states, do you feel confident that 1 space per unit, even though these are measuring out at 68 bedrooms, is going to be adequate?
We do. We have a pretty large portfolio of projects, and this is in line with that. We also tried to align it as much with the code as possible. So I do feel like it's adequate. I did have our civil engineer do a traffic quick analysis on estimated trips generated, and he came out with 167. I'm happy to share that calculation with folks. and I think, one of the things with senior developments is there's less dependency on driving for some individuals, and the trip generation is at different times of the day. It's typically not at peak rush hour.
But my question isn't necessarily based on trip generation, it's specifically based on parking spaces that the site internally can accommodate. And
Yeah.
my question would be, is one space per unit, even though you have 68 bedrooms, do we assume that seniors that are, habitating in these units would only have one vehicle?
Typically, that is what we've seen within our portfolio, yes, is they have one vehicle per household. Now, there will be exceptions to that, or there could be exceptions to that, but I think for the constraints of this site, we thought that the 48 parking spaces was adequate to serve the community. And it's also, from a marketing perspective, our management company didn't have an issue with it as well.
Your managing company, what was
They
that?
didn't have an issue with it as well.
They did not have an issue with
No,
it?
not with the one parking space per unit, essentially.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Commissioner Jones.
I've got a question. I'm looking here at the roof truss height is 39 feet. What's the total height of the building?
That I am not sure off the top of my head. I'm trying to think if it was on the renderings that we provided. I know we worked with the architects to make sure that it was not above the code limits.
All right,
But I don't know the number. I apologize off the top of my head.
that's right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Adams?
Wallach will be the full-time property manager and operator in addition to developer.
We will not be managing the property. That will be Partnership Property Management. That is a group out of Greensboro. We don't quite have enough scale in the Carolinas to manage properties, so we've relied on someone with a little bit more local expertise for that.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
At this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. Again, going over the rules of the road. 10 minutes total each side. And if there's a group and they have a spokesman, that would be preferred. Ms. Painter will be the timekeeper. So at this point, I'd like to ask anybody that is in support of this project to please come forward. And please state your name for the record.
My name is Drake Joyce. I live at 4527 Sagedale Drive, Unit 201. I just want to know where the dump trucks and the construction vehicles are going to come off. Are they going to come off Margam? Are they going to come off Kerr? Are they going to come off New Center? That's about all I want to know. And I would like to know if they put mud all over Margam, are they going to keep it clean?
Mm-hmm. That'll be a question that we'll ask the applicant to come back up and answer.
That'd be,
I said that's a question we'll have the applicant come back up and answer.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate y'all's time.
You bet. Thank you, sir. Anybody else wanting to speak in favor? State your name, please.
Good evening, Commission. Logan Secord, 2900 Newtown Drive. I'm here to speak in support of this project. As I've said in previous commissions and previous cases, we are in severe need of workforce housing developments. I presented in, I believe, September of last year to the City Council where, based on publicly available data, we have satisfied the gap for units above 80% AMHI per the 2022 study. So we need to focus on the gap for units such as this proposal at 30, 60, and 80% AMHI. Considering and framing around that I'm in support of this proposal, I do want to bring up one item of consternation and consideration for proposals like this, and this proposal specifically, and that is that this is a senior-only housing development. The concept of excluding populations from housing should always raise eyebrows. Taking a guess that there's nobody below this threshold, I would consider what your reaction would be if I proposed a development that nobody above the age of 40 could enter into. It would seem rather odd if I brought something like that forward. And perhaps that should be less odd, because in these scenarios, we encourage populations that would not otherwise be able to afford certain units. And if we look at publicly available data, according to Fidelity, the median net worth of an individual between 55 and 64 is $364,500. And from individuals 65 to 74, $409,900. Below the age of 35, $39,000. Orders of magnitude less. So I would consider in this and in all cases where there are restrictions based on age, that we are restricting those populations that are in most need of workforce housing in this. Again, I'm in support of this proposal, but considerations of can this proposal or those like it be open to everybody? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secord. Anyone else wanting to speak in favor? Okay, seeing no one, is there anyone opposed to the project that would like to speak? Going again, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the project? Okay, seeing none, and again, we got the one letter from the Cape Fear Housing. Have you guys all seen that? Okay, all right. At this point then, I'm going to close the public hearing. And is there any discussion amongst ourselves we need to have? Commissioner Collier.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question for the staff. On the site plan, there was a note related to removing the class, I think it's Class C buffer, as it could be unnecessary. Is that something that has been resolved, or is that still an outstanding item?
Yeah, the applicant is going to the Board of Adjustment to request that that buffer be removed along New Center Drive. There's a small strip of property that was left over which requires buffering rather than a streetscape yard. You can see it being highlighted on the screen in front of you, that small strip of property there. Just letter of the law of the code, it would require a buffer rather than the streetscape, so that's their request. So that'll be heard by the Board of Adjustment prior to City Council. And I did want to issue a slight correction into something I said earlier. The access on Marginal Way, that is an NCDOT road, as well as North Carr. New Center is a city street.
Does the project need to go through DAC, or were there no variances short of this buffer? Okay. All right.
There are none, no.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Lennon?
I have a question for the applicant.
Yeah, I want to bring, yeah, please come back up, because I want him to answer the question that the gentleman raised about the dump trucks and keeping the street clean and whatever.
My question's actually about the last comments that we just heard. Can you explain a little bit about why there is 55 plus versus workforce?
Yes, excuse me. So we are going in for tax credits for the state agency, the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. And one of the things that they require is if it's a, quote unquote family project, so it's more open to to every age group, or if it's senior age restricted, 55 plus or 62 plus. So that is one of the policies that is kind of within the federal code that dictates the tax credits. For this particular site, the reason 55 plus was chosen was, I think, just because of the constraints of the site. It was a smaller site, and with senior projects, there's less parking requirements. If we put even if it's a 48 unit, family development here, it would have. We would have been happy to do it, but this particular site, which was available, we couldn't support the parking on it. It would require too much parking for the small 2-acre site.
What financial analysis is done for your tenants prior to them being able to rent a unit?
They do have to income qualify, so they work through applications with the management company.
Are there limitations to that income?
Yes, there are limitations. So this particular proposal is targeting people at 30, 50, 60, and 80% AMI, which roughly from a income perspective would be roughly about 20,000 to about 55,000.
Okay, thank you.
Would you?
Yeah, and the construction comment from the gentleman in the audience, we have talked with NCDOT. That's one of the reasons we did have access on Kerr in our early iterations of this site plan, but they would not approve access there just because of the way that the intersection is designed. So that's why we have one access point. For construction, for the actual construction of the project, I do not anticipate getting on Kerr Avenue. I could not imagine that. I don't think NCDOT would approve that, so I would anticipate most of the traffic would be on Marjoram Way.
Okay. And what about the dumpsters he asked about?
The dumpsters,
Mr. Chair, I think he actually asked about the dump trucks.
Dump trucks, okay.
Yeah. And just, I mean, basically, I guess we're talking about from your access drive to New Center along Marjoram. I think it would just be good to hear an assurance that that'll be kept to the current standard that it is now.
correct, yes. And we, again, one of the benefits of having the in-house construction team, I think, is that they're right around the corner from us. So any issues that do come up can be addressed very, very quickly. But the intent, and we've done this on other projects, is to keep all roadways, clear of debris, clear of dirt, trash, all that stuff.
Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, do you have a question for the applicant or just start? Oh, I'm sorry.
So a couple of design-related questions relative to the site plan. Is there a reason that you decided to put the dumpster enclosure kind of on that end of the hammerhead as opposed to something further away from the corner intersection?
Well, I may defer to staff for this question, because I think we're going to have to rework the dumpster for this particular project, just because it's going to have to be relocated to, I think, another part of the site. But I can say the reason it's at that location is because that was the best, or why it was originally proposed at that location, was because it was the easiest access to get a hammerhead or a roundabout for the trucks to get in and out. And we just state standards, we're not allowed to have it at the main entrance of our site on Marjoram Way.
But you could have it at the other end of the hammerhead.
We could, but if I recall correctly, I think that would still be against the code per the city. But I could let them comment on that.
So that's question one. Just something like that at a prominent street corner, I think, is just problematic from a design standpoint. And there's been a number of questions about parking. It looks like, just eyeballing it, if parking was an issue during operations, that 25-ish spaces could probably be added later if you needed them, right? So it looks to me like there's some potential expansion for parking should it be a problem.
We could do that, yes, and we could work with the city for amendments or improvements, to do that. Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kofer?
Mr. Chair, just some diving in now to the building a little more, so to shed a little more color on elevator service, I'm assuming, for four
Correct.
stories?
Yes, it is.
One or two?
One elevator.
One elevator, okay. And I'm glad to hear that Commissioner Adams asked about the parking. The only reason I bring the parking up is because you're coming right after a case where we had to grant adjacent neighboring vacant land for additional parking to a project, a completely different user group than what you're targeting, but still, it's nice to know that if you did need more, you could internalize it and not come back and say, well, we needed to purchase this neighboring property to address a parking concern. So, thank you.
Okay. Will of the commission? Thoughts, comments? Commissioner Kofer?
Before we go to the motions, thank you, Mr. Gill. Looking at the project just from my opinion, I think it's a great site and it's a great noble pursuit for Wilmingtonians. It goes back to months and months ago. We had a pretty contentious case on the corner of Oleander and Independence, and I brought up the Oleander apartments. And back in the 40s and 50s, that's what those were targeted for non-vehicular use, for aging, Wilmingtonians. And I think it's a great site and it's a great opportunity, and I'm all in favor of it.
Commissioner Collier.
I have one comment. I think the project is great. I do. I'm glad we went down to 30% AMI, picked up 30, 50, 60, and 80, because that does bring into a much broader range of who will qualify for some of the senior housing. As Commissioner Adams and Koper said, the new parking or additional parking is there, so I think you could manage that going forward. For staff, I had one question for you to see if it was possible on recommended conditions number 5. It talks about the retention of trees. Is there a way that the last of that sentence can be must be protected, retained, or mitigated? Because it seems as if we're saying they must do protection or retention, and mitigation is not incorporated.
I think that condition is essentially saying that anything outside of the limits of disturbance has to be retained on site. So I'm not sure there wouldn't be an allowance to remove those trees in the first place, so there wouldn't be mitigation that would be required.
Just to add to Pat's comment, I think the specific word that we're looking at there is any significant specimen trees, and specimen trees cannot be removed without a variance from the Board of Adjustment.
Correct. I agree with that. But significant, we've got too many words in that sentence. But I understand your point. Thank you.
So are you proposing any change?
No,
or are you okay?
I know why it doesn't have.
You okay?
Yeah,
All right.
that's fine.
Commissioner Adams, anything?
My question goes back to staff a little bit. Is there something specific about the TRC requirements of that dumpster really needs to go there based on kind of this precept of this site or the site plan?
The code specifically says that dumpster can't be there, so we're working with them to relocate that dumpster on site in a different location that's not forward of the building.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, and I think this is a great project, so.
Commissioner Lennon, anything?
I wish you could start sooner.
Commissioner Woodruff, anything? Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, I'd like, several of us went to the Coalition Housing meeting last Friday. I'm on the Housing Authority Board, and there's a need for all age groups. As people retire, a lot of times their retirement doesn't cover that. And after, I was at River Lights for years, and the Del Webb was very successful and has grown in this area. So there's needs for each age group, and I like the project, so that's it.
I'll just put a fine point. I think it's a great project. So having said that, I need a motion one way or the other. Commissioner Adams?
I would like to make a motion relative to agenda item number 1, the request to conditional rezoning of 710 North Kerr Avenue, rezone from R10 to MD17 conditional district, multiple dwelling residential conditional district. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal provides affordable housing near transit services, along major corridors, and near commercial services. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
I have a motion by Commissioner Adams. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Multiple seconds, which is great. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Applicant, good luck. And like Commissioner Lennon, if you could start sooner, that'd be great. Okay, next item of business is a conditional district rezoning for property containing 11.23 acres. And I won't bother to read the, the parcel IDs, but located at 818, 902, 904, 910, 912, 914, and 1000 North Kerr or Carr, whatever your preference, from R10 medium density single dwelling to MD10 medium density multiple dwelling residential district for a 79-unit residential townhome development. Todd Rademacher is going to present to the commission.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. This site is located along North Kerr Avenue, Marjoram Way, and Azalea Landing Drive. The site is approximately 11.23 acres in size and is currently vacant. An application is concurrently ongoing for a portion of this property to annex approximately 8.265 acres to the east of Marjoram Way, and that is shown here hashed out in purple. On the left is a map of parcels currently within the city limits relevant to this application, and on the right you can see the properties for this submission currently under review for annexation to the city of Wilmington. Here you see the parcels in their totality for rezoning and zoning to medium density conditional district or MD10 conditional district for the proposed project. This map shows the site within the surrounding area and the various uses in the general vicinity of the project. Here we have the properties looking south down Marjoram Way, looking east from Marjoram Way, looking west from Azalea Landing Drive, looking east from North Kerr Avenue, and looking south along North Kerr Avenue. There's multiple road frontages on this site. This map shows this, where am I? Adjacent properties. Here's a look at the properties, the adjacent properties in the area. We've got the Cornerstone condominiums. There's vacant property to the west across North Kerr Avenue, the Cordelia condominiums, and then within the county's jurisdiction as well as within the city's jurisdiction, we've got the Duke Energy substation and right-of-way lines. Here's the existing land use and zoning map. The applicant proposes the conditional zoning and initial zoning of this acreage to the MD10 CD as we spoke about. The site is in an area that is currently zoned with residential R10 within the city and residential multifamily low density within New Hanover County's jurisdiction. The current proposal consists of 13 townhome buildings for a total of 79 total residential townhomes. Azalea Landing Drive is proposed to extend and interconnect with Marjoram Way. Access to the units from the public streets will be provided via access points for Marjoram Way and Azalea Landing Drives. Sidewalks are to be installed along all public streets. 2.25 acres of open space are required for this project, with 2.98 acres of open space being provided for the project. The minimum parking requirement is 179 spaces with a maximum allowance of 217. This site proposal is proposing 210 parking spaces for the townhomes. Here are the elevations for the property. I hit the wrong button. Excuse me. Staff notes that this is a compatible infill development, provides housing of mixed types and prices in proximity to employment areas, and staff believes the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, that the request is reasonable and in the public interest, and is recommending conditional approval. That concludes my presentation.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Kofer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this thing on? Yep. Todd, I've asked this question several times and I just can never remember. When an applicant submits an application, what elevations are they required to provide?
What elevations are they required to provide?
Just one?
Depends on the applicant, but typically they provide one elevation. Generally, they're just showing the front.
Okay. Is that,
There's
that's
no
the requirement?
specific-
Just the front elevation is the requirement?
That's the front elevation that can be seen from the right-of-way.
Is that a LDC or a part of the application process that it's like specific? You just provide the front elevation or any elevation? Or I guess where I'm going with this is there's just no elevation provided for what North Carr is going to see, whereas the previous application provided two elevations, one on New Center, one on Carr, and here we're seeing kind of what I guess will probably be the internal elevation to the site. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes, sir. There's no specific requirement for all four elevations. The elevations are required to show compliance with the MD design standards, which are the elevation that faces the internal right-of-way.
Into the right-of-way?
The internal.
The internal right-of-way?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that's the spirit of the requirement, is to get all those design elements and just, okay. That was one question. Let's talk a little bit about that, the stream that's running through what appears to be like the south side of the site.
Yes.
What is the Army Corps and the city of Wilmington? How does that balance out the jurisdiction and requirements and things of that nature?
For this stream, they'll be going for the approval through the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Army Corps of Engineers will give their permit in this case, or whatever their allowances are for the filling, the culverting of the stream, and that will be coordinated with the TRC review and the eventual development, if approved, of the property.
TRC will probably follow the Corps' sort of recommendations or allowances?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And a lot of this, I can ask the applicants. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else just for staff. And when we're talking about the 6 or 13 townhome buildings, that's just 13 pads?
Correct.
Okay. And do we know what is, just from the city stance, what is North Carr or Carr in general considered? Is that an arterial street, or how do we label that in our internal monikers for streets here?
I believe that's a major arterial.
Major arterial? Okay. Thank you. That was it.
Commissioner Adams?
In our packet, there was an inclusion of a concept site plan from January of '25 that has a slightly different layout and configuration of the buildings. Can you speak a little bit about the, I guess, finalized site plan versus
The adjusted site plan?
Sure.
Sure. There were some comments that were made during the pre-TRC meeting to line up the main entrance, to line up the extension of Azalea Landing Road, as well as the driveway going into the units to the west, to make sure that that's at a 90, because you typically want your intersections for safety reasons, to be at 90-degree angles. And then there were some considerations for trees and the adjustment for the stormwater pond, just to give more space for maintenance and accessibility reasons.
Okay, so basically it was design evolution through conversation with staff?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Just questioning, the city and county, or I guess the city's annexing a piece of it. Why has the county got a little blip of land in there in the middle?
I'm sorry,
Why does the county have that piece of land that's in the middle of the city? Isn't this part of us what we're talking about, annexation?
Yeah,
And this council will be, but.
now Livian, you bring up a great point. Let's just level set to make sure is, what we're deciding here tonight is obviously the zoning that, that should apply here. And council had, for the annexation, council, keep me honest, last night approved the first step, which was accepting the petition for annexation.
That's correct.
So that's what we're deciding tonight is what it should be.
Was that just a curiosity question? So,
No,
yeah.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, exactly. Back to the elevation question too, is, things I've been involved with, the owner applicant is not bound by these renderings, correct? Color, materials.
They have to be generally consistent with what council approves. But there is a dramatic departure from what you see on the screen. We would have conversations with the applicant, and ultimately, if it's a major departure, we'd probably ask them to go back through to get approval from council. But there is some leeway there, but there has to be general consistency.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Woodruff? Commissioner Lennon? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear from the applicant. Mr. Nichols, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Matt Nichols. I'm an attorney in Wilmington, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant, Canvas Residential Partners. My clients put together a great team of people much smarter than me, but I'll introduce them. It's Allison Ingebretson and Jim Sorello are landscape architects with Paramount. They're here this evening. Also, Dan Fisk, civil engineer with Paramount, is here this evening, and we have our transportation engineer, Reinald Stevenson, is here to help answer any questions. So if I may, Mr. Chairman, provide an overview, and then certainly I'll try to answer any questions, but I feel like I'll be deferring to the experts on some of these too. So with that said, I know that the commission is very familiar with the site. This is really a great location. Got the Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, providing quick access downtown or to the eastern part of the city. You've got North Kerr Avenue, and then we've got New Center in the front. I once heard that New Center was given its name because it was the new center of the city after the annexations. Makes sense. I don't know if that's true, but you look at it on the map after the 99 annexations, it really is the new center of the city. So that was, I think, good forward thinking on the name there. The site is going to do there's going to be a number of benefits to this. Right now, there's only one way sort of into, say, Cornerstone condominiums through Marjoram, and we're going to be providing the access there. I'll show this on another slide, but it'll be providing an access to the Azalea Landing Drive. The question about the annexation, the majority of this property is in New Hanover County, and I don't know why. I think it was a farm or had some farming background. I'll defer to the owners. I think some of the owners are here. But for some reason, it's in the county. It wasn't annexed with the other parts of the vicinity. And the property that we're talking about too, which also makes this a little different, is it's already zoned multifamily, low density, which allows more units than we're proposing tonight. So you could do 10 units an acre in the county on roughly a little bit over 8 acres. So, but my client wants to do this in the city, wants to be in the city. We want to be subject to the city code, if you will. And so we see a lot of benefits to having the entire project in the city and doing it all under the city code. So that's why we're here. So I think it is a unique request. Again, the gray area in the middle of the map would show the county. There's the RMFL, low density, where the subject property is outlined in yellow, and then the R15 to the south is still in the county. This is the city zoning map. And then what we're proposing with the MD10, I would respectfully contend, is entirely consistent with what the current zoning and uses are there. You've got MD10 To the north, you've got MD 17 to the east, and you've got a power line easement to the south. And so it really, from a zoning standpoint, I hope that the commission sees it this way too, but really makes sense as MD 10. The site plan, I will defer to Allison and Jim on some of the particulars of the site plan, but I would say as a highlight, and Todd did a nice job of highlighting the items, 13 townhome buildings, total of 79 units. These are 3 and 4 bedroom units. We're providing almost 3 acres of open space, more than the requirement. I mentioned the Azalea Landing Drive access, so that will connect to what is the existing termination point of Azalea Landing Drive to the east, and that will provide connectivity to the Cordelia development, and then also provide an additional access way onto Marjoram, which I think is a big benefit from a safety standpoint. So we have, again, I'll move through these slides quickly, and certainly we can come back and answer any questions about the specific site plan. I know the renderings were talked about here. We've got another one here. You can see that, as proposed, the units on the ends of the buildings would be would have the 2-car garages and larger units, probably the 4-bedroom units. So I talked about the county density. This is really just a parallel density to the existing zone in the county. And mentioned compatibility with surrounding uses. In the interest of time, I'll speed this up. Comprehensive plan, the staff's recommending approval, but it's entirely consistent with your comprehensive plan. Again, great location, close to jobs, close to commerce, businesses, services, goods, close to the parkway, employment opportunities. Traffic generation, this is from the staff report. I would say fairly minimal traffic impact. And when you look at the table 3.4.3b from the staff report, this is really the first time I think I've had a development proposal where there's a negative net difference here. So I'm glad to sort of run with this slide, if I may, for a second. But I would say that you don't see this too often, and that's because you could get more units from a zoning standpoint if you just developed it in the county. I think you'd get 80. You could potentially get 82 units under that zone, and then you could get roughly 13 under the existing R10. So, from a zoning standpoint, so I won't read all of these. I covered most of these points.
I apologize. I just wanted to let you know that we are over about a minute and a half over time at this point, so it's up to you.
2 more minutes, 1 minute?
I'm done.
You're done? Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we've heard from the staff, we've heard from, are there any questions of the applicant before we go to the public hearing? Commissioner Adams.
Sorry, Matt. Are these planned to be for rent or for owned residential?
For sale, yes,
for
sir.
sale.
It's a for sale product.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Lennon.
I just wanted to, excuse me, for those of you who wonder why I keep looking at his monitor, mine is fried. I just want to understand the connectivity piece again.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
Pull up the,
Sure.
map.
See if I can get this. Let me see, what might be, this may do
I
it.
guess said another way is, okay, so I think this does it. So Azalea right now stops at the county property line?
Essentially, yes, sir.
Okay, but it's going to continue through to Marjoram?
Yes, sir. That's part of the development that we'll be required to do, and that would extend with Azalea Landing, which now sort of connects in behind Target, if you will.
Yep.
And, but again, I think that interconnectivity is a big benefit to that area.
So right now, they would be residents in the condominium complex, I forget what you called it,
Cornerstone, yes, sir.
they would be able to go out on, basically end up on New Center, another further down New Center,
That's correct, yes, sir.
closer to Market.
Right,
Okay.
right now, if you turn onto Marjoram off of New Center, I believe there's a sign, no outlet. There's one way in and one way out.
Okay.
There's no access onto Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway from the back, and there's no access to North Kerr Avenue. You'll see Sagedale Drive shown on the map, but that does not connect to North Kerr Avenue. So it's, I don't know if dead end is the right word, but one way in, one way out. And we're going to be providing that additional access, which I think's a big benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I've got one quick question. I see proposed pump station. Is CFPUA putting that in, or is that the developer?
Let me make sure I'm answering that correctly. Developer, that is developer install.
Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Nichols, question number 1, where is it? So without the elevations on North Kerr, can someone talk about the 15-foot class buffer and the distance from Kerr in general?
I may ask Allison to come up if I may, because we are providing a buffer there, but Allison, do you mind?
Hi, I'm Allison Ingebretson with Paramount Engineering. I am a landscape architect, so I can talk to you about what we plan to do there. That area behind the last 2 townhomes there at North Kerr, we have open space, but it'll be landscaped open space.
Could you bring the microphones down a little bit? I'm sorry.
Yes, is that better?
Thank you.
Okay. It will be landscaped open space. So in conjunction with that 15-foot buffer, which is relatively minimal against a large road, we're going to keep some existing trees, work with that, and then bring in some additional trees. Those 2 sites right there, there are a few parcels right there that were old home sites, and there are actually some really nice oak trees and magnolias back in that area. So that's one of the reasons that we didn't pull the building so far back. So that is our plan.
And so when we read 15-foot Class B buffer, that's 15 linear feet from Kerr to the rear of the structure?
Correct.
And is there any fencing?
We have not discussed that with our client, but I imagine that we will put fencing in that area just for soundproofing more than anything. We have talked about doing fences at the back of the lots, so that piece I can speak to, and that would be before it gets to the landscaped open space and buffers.
Okay, I got you. All right, that was one question, just because there are projects that, you know, as these plans leave our desk and come out of the ground, where you realize, well, when you're going down an arterial street, Wrightsville Avenue being the case I'm mentioning, and you look at the rear of a bunch of townhomes, it's, you know, from a design and form stance, it's not the most attractive. And North Kerr, you know, has such a blank canvas as it transitions back towards Market. You know, to me, that side, even though it's minimal compared to the whole site, it is important, because I do have a commissioner on this board with me that says design does matter, so I've kind of heard that a time or two.
I would support that as well.
So anything you can do to sort of protect that street side, I think is very important for the character as it continues to develop.
One of the things that I might say about that also is that there is a DOT project there on Kerr, and we're also trying to figure out what they're doing and the extent of where their destruction and rebuild might be and what we need to do to react to that. So we don't have firm plans right now, but do plan to address it.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Next question may not be landscape architect relevant.
Okay.
The next one, Mr. Nichols, you mentioned on the site plan with the elevation we have and the 4-bedroom versus 3-bedroom units that there's a good chance the 4 bedrooms will have those dual garages. Do you have any confirmation of that?
Yes, sir, that is the plan.
That's the plan?
That's the plan, yes, sir. And those would be So if you have 13 buildings, it would roughly be 26
Yeah.
four-bedroom, and then if I do the math right, what does that leave us for the three bedrooms? 53.
Okay.
53, yes, sir.
And as I mentioned to the last applicant, as we get further and further away from last month or two's, item where we did have a developer come back and need to rezone a residential parcel to basically a commercial parking lot, it was, staff objected, and we realized it merited, the additional parking. But as Commissioner Adams mentioned, it looks like your site has ample parking should this development need more. While we've got the site plan in front of us, building number 13, it looks like that is the only one that is impacted by that wetland piece. Is that the site where we would be filling the wetlands and building on top of it?
Yes, sir. There's currently this is an older wetland study that was provided. We're currently under review right now, and we believe those wetlands have gotten a little smaller. So we don't think the impact is quite as great as what we're showing here. We're waiting on the Corps to come back and tell us that. But yes, sir, that would be a slight impact if we believe it.
And that is is that really kind of it?
The crossing at the stream is the only other thing that we would be dealing with.
And crossing of the stream, I mean, I've read that, is that a bridge, or what are we thinking there?
We will likely do a culvert, and our civil engineer is here if you'd like details on that. But generally speaking, what we do in these situations is have, a paved road section and a culvert that is approved with the impact.
And yes, that's coming off of Smith Creek and winding. There's a big topographical change from Marjorie Way down to your site.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that. And I believe that is all of my questions. Thank you both.
Anyone else? Commissioner Lennon?
This may be for the civil, but before somebody's head explodes because somebody just said fill in wetlands and build on top of them, can somebody explain how that actually happens, please?
I can. Okay. So in any job, we always have to do a wetland delineation. And if we propose any sort of impact, we have to work with an environmental consultant, and then we have to submit that to the Corps for approval. So it's not an automatic, we're able to actually go in and impact any of those. And it has to prove avoidance. So if there's anything that we could do in any other configuration, the Corps will make us do it that way. So we go through a series of exercises with them and the environmental consultant to figure out exactly what can be impacted and what cannot be impacted.
And depending on the size of the impact, you may have to mitigate that somehow.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And does impacting a small portion of wetlands for a building necessarily increase the likelihood of flooding? Or, I mean, there's a stormwater plan that goes along with this.
Oh, yes,
too,
there
right?
is. So what we are being told on that particular piece is that it's the very tip of a piece of wetlands. So if we were to impact this, it's not got a great downstream effect. And I can explain that in more detail, but it is in conjunction with our grading plans and our stormwater plans, and all of that gets considered at the same time.
Okay, thank you. My other,
go ahead.
My other question had to do with the lift station, so I don't know who's the best person to ask that of.
Yes, sir.
Is the lift station going to just service this site, or is there?
To our knowledge at this time, yes, we were working in conjunction with CFPUA, so if there is anything where they require it to serve any further sites, we'd work with them to provide that. But at this time, it's only needed relative to the shallower gravity that is around this area relative to this site.
I think you addressed my point, which is if there are other people in this basin
Yes.
that don't have service, this may be an opportunity for them to get, understanding there'd be a cost sharing with CFPUA and
Correct, and that's why I said if we're working with them, and if that is deemed necessary, we would. To my knowledge, the site to the north doesn't need any further sewer capacity to serve it, and the site that was developed to the east does not either. So it would be relative to anything further south is, I think, all that's left.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Commissioner Kofer.
Jump in with one question while you're up there with the CFPA questions. What is the requirement per day, per gallon, per bedroom? What is the formula? Just
The 2T state rules recently changed, so it's 75 gallons per bedroom is the way they did it.
Per day.
And they no longer separate 1 and 2 bedrooms. It's 75 gallons per bedroom.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
I just have one general question. When, assuming, it approves here and it gets approved by council, when are you planning on breaking ground? What is your game plan?
I think as soon as possible. My client, Creighton Call, is here, managing partner of the developer applicant. But my understanding is as soon as possible.
I asked the question, Matt, just as we sat through the prior applicant, and based on their time frame, they would, because they're obviously right in the same place, they're going to be looking at 2026. And I would hope we don't have a situation where somebody's got to go out there and be a traffic cop.
Much to my dismay, the former applicant said 2027.
Did he say 2027? I
Yes,
thought he
sir.
said 26.
No, he said 27. That's why I asked him to hurry up.
Ah,
If you look at a schedule, a lot of that's regulatory driven.
Yeah.
You got to have the plans, you got to have it engineered, then you go through the approvals. So it takes a while before you can break ground.
that's fine. I just wanted to ask the question for the benefit of the folks in the room, the benefit of the folks that might be tuned in. So,
Yes, sir.
okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to open the public hearing, going over the ground rules again. 10 minutes for proponents, 10 minutes for opponents. So at this time, I'm going to open the 10 minutes, and is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of the project? Please state your name.
Drake Joyce, I live at 4527 Cornerstone. Let's see, 4527 Sagedale Drive. A little bit nervous, sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm the vice president of HOA, and we're for this project for the simple reason the land right now is full of homeless bums, I call them. Call them what you want to. But anyway, there's needles and everything else. So I hope this project gets going sooner than later, and we are all for this project and would like to see it done. The only thing I want to know is, are there going to be sidewalks to New Center with street lights? And that's what we would really like, and keep the roads clean. Thank you very much.
When we get to the end of the public hearing, I'll ask the applicant to respond to any comments that they've heard, plus or minus, and that would be one that I would ask them to respond to.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Steve Culberth. I'm an attorney. I represent the present owners who are selling the property. And I can try to explain some of what Ms. Jones' question was. I think this was done because that was basically farmland, and it's been rezoned from the north and from Kerr Avenue, but they never got to this. Believe me, it would have been a lot easier if it had already been. Right now, I'm having to call the city police for the smaller piece of property and the sheriff for the larger piece of property, because if you'll recall, back last summer, there was a large encampment of homeless over on the DOT property. And about the setback, there's about 20 feet of setback from the from the paved area, curb line of Kerr Avenue right now that belongs to DOT, that it's going to be there. The bypass, or when they build the overpass, that will come out somewhere near the northern corner of the small piece of property from over on where those folks were. It's really been a problem out there for the Cornerstone people. My people inherited the land. They were raised there, the grandchildren of the original owners, and they tore down their homestead, their houses where they were raised when they widened Kerr Avenue. So they don't have anybody out there to keep the people off the property. And it is a real problem. I mean, we've had situations, the folks that were testing were scared to go in there because they've been threatened by some of these people in there. So, and I've written letters to the sheriff and to the city. I just met last week with the city out there again. I'll be glad to answer any questions any of you have.
I think we're good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the project? Okay, let's move to anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the project. Okay, seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to come back up. There was a question, if you want to respond to that question on the sidewalks.
Yes, we can respond to that. So the piece of Marjoram Way there that is within the project boundary, we will build sidewalk on both sides of the road. Our intention is to take that piece that is currently a DOT road and work towards the ultimate goal of dedicating that to the city. So we will build it to city standards and coordinate with both parties as needed. That work doesn't necessarily mean that we'll go all the way to New Center Drive, but if that's part of the agreement worked out between all the parties, that's what we'll do.
Okay. All right.
How about the lighting? I think the gentleman asked about the lighting.
Yes, part of the city's requirements is to install streetlights, so we will do that as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Seeing no other people wishing to speak, I'm going to close the public hearing. And commissioners. Yeah, I'm going to right hand this time.
You know, based on lots of things that I see and comments that I hear when we're developing, this to me is a perfect site for density. It's in a node, walkability, bus, it's central. You know, you got Target, grocery, retail, good open space they've accommodated for, so I don't have any problems with it.
Mr. Woodruff.
I mean, we've been down this road before about needing more housing. This project and the one we just did before, I mean, this is some of the largest tracts of vacant land hardly left in the city. I think the planning here is being done well to do the density that's needed and to accommodate the people that need it. I think it's a good project.
Commissioner Lennon.
Problem with going third is they always say what I want to say, but the only thing I would add is I do concur with Commissioner Kofer about just the view from Kerr Avenue as that continues to go through that project. I think everything that can be done to make that buffer solid would be great, but this is exactly what the LDC asked for, and they delivered it, I think.
Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised we're not talking about a proposal for more density on this site. And, you know, I think this as a housing product type as an alternative compared to, you know, some of the higher densities or single family is something that's needed. You know, I'm also appreciative of working with staff. I mean, I'm looking at the tree save plan right now and how the open space was reconfigured. Obviously preserves a lot more trees than kind of the initial plan. So it's a project I can support.
Commissioner Collier, anything?
Nothing really to add, Mr. Chair. No, I think it is a great plan. It's a great product in the right location, so we fully support it.
Commissioner Kofer, anything?
Yeah, I'll just say that I'll be in favor of this tonight, and just to be hypercritical on that elevation piece, yes, if I could have had that elevation, that would be the only nitpicking of the site plan. I concur with Mr. Commissioner Adams. You know, I'm surprised there's not more density being requested, but I understand it's a for-sale product, so it probably makes more sense versus the last applicant that was coming forward. And I think, you know, it's just setting the pace for what we might see on North Carr. And you know, I think Mr. O'Mahony's the one who says it sometimes, that the edges are the most difficult, and this is truly right on the edge of the city-county line, and so well done, yeah.
Okay, having said that, I need a motion to proceed forward. Commissioner Lennon?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for approval on agenda item number 2, the request for rezoning of 818, 902, 904, 910, 912, 914, and 1000 North Carr Avenue from R10 residential and RMFL multifamily to MD10's conditional district, medium density multiple dwelling residential conditional district. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and the Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, as the proposal allows for housing of mixed types and prices in close proximity to employment areas and commercial services. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
I have a motion from Commissioner Lennon. Do I have a second? I have a second from Commissioner Collier. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, I've had a request to take a 5-minute break before we get into the next item. So at this point, we will take a 5-minute break, and let's hold it to 7 minutes. Okay, we are back in session. Everybody's here. So the third item on our agenda tonight is an LDC amendment to amend the City Code, Chapter 18, to eliminate special use permits and replace them with conditional zoning. Brian Chambers, our Assistant Director, will overview this to the Commission.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. This amendment would replace special use permits with conditional zoning. Special uses are those that may have unique impacts on surrounding properties. They're typically a residential or institutional use in a residential area. Examples would be a community center, commercial parking lots, private recreation facilities, group living facilities. I think a couple of these you've actually seen in front of you, and for other reasons. Required special use, they all require special use permit that will be approved by City Council via quasi-judicial hearing. Quasi-judicial hearing, it prohibits communication with City Council. The speakers must have standing, so it excludes most citizens from participation, and there are strict rules for what evidence can be presented by the speakers at those meetings. So there are currently 22 special uses in the code. 9 of these are exclusive to the historic districts. If you'll see the small table on the left, we've had average maybe 1 a year since the new code was adopted. I will say that as part of the code adoption in 21, there was an effort to reduce the number of uses that require special use permits. There used to be 55, and now there are 22. The table on the right just summarizes what those uses are in the districts in which the special use permit is required. The proposal tonight would be to eliminate special uses in the special use permits. These uses would then be allowed through conditional zoning. Conditional zoning, as the name implies, would require a conditional zoning district. So if you had a private recreation facility that required a special use permit in the R15, you wouldn't get a special use permit. You would just rezone that R15 to an R15 CD to allow for that use to occur. They would require legislative hearings before this board and the City Council. This is a comparison of the process for each. the special use permit process and the conditional rezoning process, and what I've outlined in red are the main differences. Under special use permit process, it is a city council decision only, and it's a quasi-judicial hearing. For a rezoning process, there is a staff recommendation, a planning commission recommendation, and then a city council decision is a legislative hearing. The amendment removes a barrier to public participation. It allows for communication with elected officials. It simplifies public hearing process. There would be no changes to the number of uses permitted or any prescribed conditions for any of those uses. Staff believes the proposal is reasonable in the public interest and is recommending approval. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Let me kind of start because what I think this is, Brian, you know, as we've discussed and has gone through it again, this looks, and I'll use Danny's word, this looks like a workflow, a proposed workflow change. I mean, I don't see that you're taking away any ability to access what is currently special use. You're just proposing a different way to go at it.
It's strictly a change in how the public hearing is held, and it brings this commission back into that process as a recommending body.
Okay? Commissioner Adams.
Are there unique attributes to a special use permitting process that are different or independent from conditional rezoning? Like, could you ask only for like a single item of variance, like height in a special use versus a conditional where that's part of a number of things? I'm trying to understand a little bit about, are there specific things about the two different processes that are kind of independent from one another in the terms of the criteria?
Well, the processes are different. The public hearing processes are uniquely different. I don't believe there's any special use permits for a specific dimensional standard. I think the legacy code had special use permits for increased height in certain districts, but the new code does not have that. There's just basically a by right height, and then some have allowances with additional requirements for step backs and setbacks and that kind of thing. So I don't think there's anything other than the uses themselves.
Okay, so that was my sort of question. It's really use and use for
Right.
sort of both processes.
It's use, and the same prescribed conditions would be applied. It's just, do you want to approve this through a conditional process or a special use permit process, which has different standards for how that public hearing is organized and run.
For things like dimensional standards, what kind of other opportunities would there be for relief or discussion besides conditional zoning?
I'm not sure I'm following your question.
I guess I'm asking, I mean, setbacks, height, those kind of things could be addressed at Board of Adjustment.
Right.
Independently of going through.
Right, any variance that is pursued would have to be approved before it got to council, just like any other conditional zoning. So if there's a variance for any kind of standard in the code outside of the use itself, they would go to the Board of Adjustment or the DAC to get that approval before it goes to council.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Commissioner Lennon?
Where'd this come from?
This came from a council meeting that occurred a couple months back.
There was a disaster.
Holly tree?
Yes.
It was a disaster, right?
I believe I've heard that word used to describe that.
Maybe a few
meeting.
others, yeah. Let's start on this slide. What public participation is prevented in a special use permit process? And before you answer, look at that picture that's up there right now. Could those people all attend that hearing? The biggest snafu in that hearing that lasted 3.5 hours, whatever it was trying to figure out who could testify and who couldn't. But those people were not prevented from participating. I mean, that's one point that I want to bring up. The other one is, I mean, are they prevented from writing letters?
Yes.
So council can't read any.
Council cannot have any communication regarding that permit
But
at
they can,
all
people
outside
can
of that meeting.
protest, people can fill the room, people can wear red T-shirts, green T-shirts, whatever they choose to do. My problem is that what's basically being said here, the way, and I want to be very clear, the way it's being presented is that we want to give the public the opportunity to stand up and provide
essentially opinions, not facts. And case in point, when council was doing in one of their agenda reviews about the bridge, very nice woman who's affiliated with a historic foundation, who lives somewhere else, stood up and said verbatim that how much cheaper a 100-foot bridge was going to be than a 135-foot bridge. Well, that individual is no more qualified to talk about that than they are flooding or traffic counts or anything else. Mr. Rogers' neighborhood at the end of last meeting pointed out the traffic counts. And historically, that's data. Someone standing up and saying, this is going to flood my street with traffic. So that, to me, is not public participation, that's public opinion. And so the way this is being presented, I'm concerned. I'm not necessarily against the process, but I don't think, can you go back to the use table again? And this is not at you, I'm just frustrated by this. Look at the historic district. Tell me one of those things you think would pass in a conditional district hearing. What, just one, pick one.
I don't know that I can answer that.
Exactly, because it's arbitrary and because we're going to be allowing essentially irrelevant testimony about what people want to protect.
I couldn't pick one that wouldn't pass, so it goes both ways.
Okay, fair enough. But, so that's why I'm really confused as to, because we have one bad, I don't say we, and I'm respectful of council, but because there's one bad meeting experience, we want to throw this out. The last thing I'll say about this, I think y'all obviously see where I'm at now, and I've worked myself into a lather even more so, is I do not see how the way this is presented, and I'm going to emphasize that point, this is not a down zone. Because of the point I just made in regards to, I'm going to pick on the district that has the highest number of uses in the current table. At least as a property owner, I have a shot with a special use permit by presenting facts and evidence at a quasi-judicial hearing. If I go to a conditional district rezoning, that brings an entire element into it that probably is not going to include all those facts and evidence. I don't see how it's not a downzoning. And that to me is sort of reminiscent of the whole Airbnb fiasco that the city went through years ago. And I don't want to see a lawsuit come out of this because we've not thought through, creating transparency in the code so that if someone knows, okay, if I want to do commercial parking, this is the procedure I've got to go through. And the way it's presented to me just doesn't get us there.
Let me jump in. Having chaired quasi-judicial hearings for a year before I joined this group, I think the gap that, and yes, we've all referenced the city council meeting that has probably been the genesis of this. I think the gap that occurs to me from a public participation is from experience and having sat in the room with some of the neighbors before it started. They were, I'll just say from my perspective, totally blindsided when they came into this room as to how the process was going to work, such that when the applicant's attorney, was questioning the standing of people's, ability to be, to be able to testify, there was nobody on the opposite side. It was a pretty one-sided conversation. And I'm not saying that's good, but I mean, that's what the current process allows to happen. So, and having run those meetings for a year, it was an interesting process because the way we always ran them was, if you believe you in a quasi-judicial have standing, you need to stand up, you need to come and be sworn in, and that was pretty much the extent of it. So that doesn't necessarily address your point about who's the expert, who's the opinion person. And this process doesn't, as it is today, really doesn't allow the public to be appropriately represented, and it doesn't really, in my opinion, one man's opinion, it doesn't allow the how do I want to say it? It doesn't allow for more balanced discussion. Now, I accept your point. Hang on. I accept your point about the way it's presented, and I think before we're done here tonight, my prediction is we'll probably make some suggestions on verbiage and whatever, but I'm struggling with, I'm trying to understand the proposed workflow change, because that's what it is to me. It's a process change. What is being taken away? I want to understand that as well. So that's kind of where, John, that's where my head's at.
Right, but I understand your point about people showing up, but work with me for a second.
Yeah, sure.
That's like saying you didn't know you can't get on an airplane because your passport is within 6 months of expiration, right? It's the same thing. You get ready to take a trip, you do some homework, you figure that out. You live next door to something that's getting ready to be rezoned through special use or conditional district or wherever it might be, you do some homework. So I don't really agree with that. I don't agree that we're taking anything from the public. If the public's concerned, they can have people that have standing testify. They can hire somebody to come up and testify as to stormwater, as to traffic, as to impacts on value, all of those different things. And so I don't think we're taking, when we say public engagement, what we mean is giving people 10 minutes at the microphone to voice opinions. And I don't want to, I'm not diminishing that. I think people should be able to express them, but that shouldn't drive rezoning decisions. And that I think is a protection of the special use permit process that would be taken away.
Okay. Right, Brian, you were going to respond to John's.
I forgot at this point what that response is going to be.
And I apologize for introducing memory fade. Mr. Collier, Commissioner Collier, Commissioner Adams. Okay, back to left side again.
I think, John, for me, the whole reason, like, we exist is because we are content and subject matter experts. And for us to be able to offer our guidance, no matter what voices we hear, whether they're qualified or not, they live adjacent to the property. I mean, I think that us as a body, we have the ability to kind of parse through that. And by having, I'm going to say it a more standardized way that happens, we should be able to be that tip of the spear in a little bit. I mean, again, I think that's why we all sort of signed on to do this as volunteers. I mean, I watched what happened, and I feel like with the Holly Tree thing, that, you know, the council, I think they rely on this group to provide that as a service and guidance, and it clearly, you know, didn't happen in that case. So more opinions and more input aren't necessarily bad, in my opinion. It's us as the Planning Commission distilling that, making judgment, offering advice. That's sort of why we're here. And you know, that's my sort of response to basically the quality of opinion, or you know, who is sort of offering input on this process. Is it shifting it more a little bit on us as an organization as opposed to saying only these members of the public can do it? Probably, but again, I think that's why we're all here. That's why I'm here.
Commissioner Jones, you had,
Richard, go.
well, I'm trying to go left or right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I have the same sentiment. I'll go back to River Lights, and we still have a community hearing for the special use. I was fortunate to have a development agreement that we didn't have to do that, but still just the community hearings, 200, 250 people saying random things. You're going to make the value property in Silvaterra go down. One lady was so mad, her son on that 1,400 acres had been riding his four-wheeler. the things that are arbitrary that come up, and I think how many special use permits hearings have we had? 5, did you say?
Since
6?
Since the new code has been adopted, we've had 4, and one of them hasn't gone to council yet.
So it's not something that gets used a lot, but our elected officials are voted in, I get that, but they're listening, sometimes listening to a minority of the population that are saying things that are not factual. And I think this process, helps with property rights and is not subjective. But I have the same, I won't repeat what others have said. And, when we did the Avenue, we probably had 8, one official community hearing, we probably had 8 neighborhood committee meetings. And y'all probably heard or know, but when you go in those meetings, people will spit in your face, people will say things that they shouldn't say, and we reached out to communities and the citizens to involve them. But then we also had communities that we had meetings with, and I won't say convinced them, but we tried to answer all of their questions. So it is happening, not in the council forum, but anyway, that's my comments.
Brian, I've been battling over this for 2 days now, I think. I've learned more about special use permits than I thought I knew already. Not for, not against them, one way or the other. I think this wholesale change of going from we had a process to we're just going to remove that completely and drop them all into conditional zoning, I don't necessarily agree with that 100%. Do I think there are many of those items that could be put into a commercial zoning or conditional zoning? Yes. The list of things that we're talking about, there was a reason for them remaining on a special use permit to start with. Alternative financial services, I still don't know what that is. I understand what a marina is. I understand what a library is. John made a very good point that, quite honestly, I missed in all my looking because I didn't have a pretty little graph like this, that the majority of special use permits are within the historic districts. There's some other things, wireless telecommunications and wind and energy. To me, they don't need to go through a conditional. They should go through wireless, and they should have testimony of an expert that it is needed in this place for this reason. Especially wind energy, if we all agree that it is something that we want to pursue in the future, whether it happens or not, it does need expert testimony and not, I don't think I want to see it on the horizon at the ocean when I'm sitting at the beach. It's a valid point, but it's certainly not as they call it, standing for special use permits. I think we can do something slightly different. I do think that there is a need for a special use permit in certain items. I think there are the others that can move. Can we change some of the special use permits to put those same, make them Cs instead of CZs, so they have conscribed prescription. What is that called?
Prescribed conditions.
Prescribed conditions, right? Can we change some of them to that so we're not just going all or nothing? And I know that's a broader picture because now we're looking at, well, this one should and this one shouldn't. But I don't know that we need to throw out everything at this point. I think we still need those guardrails of the special use permit or a process similar to that. The prescribed conditions have a lot of that built into them too, and there's many more C's on that list than there are S's. I think we've got a lot of the civic use on here, and the civic uses in a daycare or a dormitory or some of those kind of things. I think we could probably come up with whether they are adequate in a multifamily multifamily, MD 17 or, UMX or something like that, without having to go through a full-blown conditional rezoning. You're assuming that if it's in a special use permit, the zoning's already taken care of, so you're getting that for a specific zone. We're talking to it as if we're going to rezone it again under a conditional zoning or add a conditional zoning overlay, I guess is what it would be called. We got to balance it. I think there's a better way to balance what we're doing, and it's not just throwing one out and going to a different one. We have, I bet the numbers, if I put conditional zoning district cases on your fiscal year 22 through 25 are significantly higher than what we've got in special use permits. I concur that the situation that occurred in January, bad situation, somebody played a loophole. That's not what the code intended, and I know we have many unintended consequences in the code. But, I don't know that says let's just stop it and not do anything with it. I like certain times of having that ability to, you have expert testimony for whatever the case is. And really the biggest of the ones I've ever handled have been on a height adjustment or some other variance like that. And of course, now we don't have that. It was written out of the code, which what you wrote into the code is better, because now in those same districts that I used to try to get 75 feet, you can go to 96 feet by right. So, it does, there's been a lot of good things that have happened, but I don't think we take special use permits completely away. I think there's got to be something in the middle that we can adjust to. Now, do private recreational facilities, do they need to be in any of the residential communities? I suspect the answer to that is they probably do, because I think we do exclude clubhouses and pools and stuff for a community. Is that right?
Those would be neighborhood amenities.
Neighborhood amenities, yeah. So, I think there's some place that can go. Does that one need to be in a conditional district zoning? Yeah, probably so. So do multiple dwellings and spas and health clubs, things that are going to be controversial. But some of the other things, I think they can be handled either with prescribed conditions or remaining as a special use permit. I guess that's my 2 cents for right now. I'm still very much struggling with this issue. I would rather us, instead of standing on yeah, we love it and we don't want SUP, or we're going to get rid of SUP or keep SUP. There's got to be something in the middle so that we make it work. We make the process work, because that's the goal. It's not to. I don't think the goal is to eliminate SUPs, or we'd erode it out of the code in 2020. I think the goal is to make the process more effective and more transparent. That's the way I've read it all, and it took me a few minutes to get to that point in my head, but that's where I think we're at.
Commissioner Woodruff.
Brian, something more basic. How did this get on our agenda?
There's discussions among staff and the attorney's office based on feedback we received after that council meeting.
Feedback from council.
There was feedback from council. There was discussions with the attorney's office and then staff in general, and we decided to move this forward.
Okay. And, with the idea that what's before us now is a complete elimination, was there a middle ground in your discussions? That you've heard here,
We did not discuss a middle ground. We looked at what Charlotte does for conditional zoning, and they don't have special use permits. We looked at that as kind of a model, and that was kind of the basis of just removing that process to allow for a more straightforward approach to these uses in these districts.
Okay. And within your discussions in-house, was there any negative comments about doing this?
Not that I recall.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got to walk this back a little bit just to understand how the city operates on just simple conditional uses. So we've got the table, we've got S, we've got P, we've got C, permitted by right. They don't have to come really, I mean, I'm just hypothetically, they don't really have to talk to staff at all, but then in conditional, what's the critical path for conditional uses in the city of Wilmington? I don't know.
The P was permitted by right, so they would just have to meet the development standards of the code for that use. If it's a C, that means there are prescribed conditions, which means there's, in Article 3 of the code, has specific criteria for that specific use that also have to be adhered to on top of what the minimum code requirements are.
And what body enforces compliance with the conditions?
Planning staff.
Planning staff.
It's handled through the TRC process.
Handled through TRC, and never does that. And when it's a conditional C on the table, does it ever go to a board or council?
No.
Staff level approvals.
It would be administrative review and approval.
Administrative approvals. Okay, so P and C, no boards, no council. S is really the only one in uses.
Yes, sir.
And when we look at S, we have 22, and 9 of those are exclusive to the historic district, which we all know has their own HOA-like rules and regs. So that brings us down to 13. And when I look at the uses, they're so unusual to me, my personal opinion, and uncommon, and most can't even be monetized in the free enterprise. I don't really, what I hear my colleagues saying is this is more about the procedural change to me than it is just these few uses that were really, I mean, I just can't see us taking a whole lot away from the private property owner with this shift. So what are we doing? We're based on maybe some remarks from council, we're trying to help them. We serve at the pleasure of the council. We're trying to create some type of vetting committee before these few uses, one a year maybe, gets to them, which I think is fair. They deserve that instead of being blindsided. I don't see the public losing anything either way. So if the question is, do we want this process to be legislative? So the root to me maybe is the question, do we want the process to be legislative or quasi-judicial? If it should be quasi-judicial, then maybe an amendment to the workflow should be that this goes before the Board of Adjustment. And then and this would be a change, because usually when cases land at the Board of Adjustment, they don't go past the Board of Adjustment, but perhaps, just follow me, it goes to the Board of Adjustment, and then it goes to council. So you get through that quasi-judicial path. Council still has a dress rehearsal vetting committee to get them prepared, and you keep the quasi-judicial expert-only, standing-only testimony, or you come our way and you go legislative, and everybody has their day to speak, and if you want to bring experts, you bring experts, which most applicants do anyhow. So I don't know, this is so foreign to me, just full disclosure, because I'm coming from Wrightsville Beach, where we have conditional use permits come through the planning board. If you're C on this table, Mr. Nichols is staying here to listen to us. He knows, I mean, you come through the planning board just to get a conditional use permit before you go to the Board of Aldermen. So Wilmington's different in that regard, because it's administratively and staff level approval, which I think is a great thing. And on these few uses, you've got to get through a committee to get to council. I don't know, it just makes sense. If I was on council, I would not want to be blindsided by something like this coming my way until I got a chance to watch the tape here or at Board of Adjustment. And that's just me, and that's my thoughts. That's how I end it. Thank you.
A couple comments as I listen to my peers and respect everything that's been said. I truly do. I don't think there's anything in the current processes today that prevents an applicant from bringing expert facts to the table. I mean, we sat through two, situations tonight, and, the applicant came up, had their experts. In the case of, we talked about landscaping, we talked about, sidewalks, whatever, but they had their engineering experts and their different subject matter experts here. Changing this as it's laid out isn't going to change that. I mean, so that's kind of my one reaction. So there's nothing here that's I view as a takeaway for the applicant, okay? Again, we've talked a lot about the ability for the you know, either preserve or allow the public to have their input, and I think that is you know, that is a goal that somehow we've got to figure out how to meet. But having said that, if there's nothing else here, we need to go to a public hearing and go through that process. For the applicant? Yeah, that's the applicant. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Why weren't these taken out of the rewrite in 2020, 2021?
I'd have to look at the individual conditions for each individual use as to maybe there's something that they wanted to keep it under that process. And we didn't have an alternative process like we're discussing tonight, so.
So would there be, had they been removed, would there have been prescribed conditions assigned to each one if they were just included as a by right within a zoning classification?
All of these uses have prescribed conditions. They just also require a special use permit. So the C is for a prescribed condition that is administrative. The S, there's going to be prescribed conditions outlined in the code, but it also requires a special use permit. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, but, you know, I may be the lone wolf, but I'm okay with that. But I still think if there are prescribed conditions here, even if we put them as conditional use in the same prescribed conditions, the difference is there doesn't have to be any justification for the way anybody votes on it. Right?
It would be a legislative hearing.
So that's a yes, okay.
The legislative hearing.
Okay.
My big,
go ahead.
Again, SUPs go under the assumption 98% of the time that they are, the zoning, underlying zoning is already correct. They're not you're not trying to put it in somewhere that it's, you know, you're not trying to put a round hole, whichever it is, square peg in a round hole. It is a special use permit for that use to be able to go into that zoning that it would be a by right use of, or at least the zoning it would work in the zoning. So the special use permit then applies, it applies the standards and the processes that are required for it to be there. But it also means if you anything changes on that property down the road, there is no major or minor thing on it. It's if you change it, you go back and you've got to go through the special use permit again. And so it's not as, and with the legislative, the conditional zoning, there is a little bit of tolerance in what is considered a major change and a minor change, what can be approved, reapproved at staff level and what cannot. And I do like in the LDC that has been defined better of what that threshold is, because that I think makes it easier for everyone. Different subject. But again, I think special use permits, in my mind, your zoning's already there, you're getting a special use permit to get over a hump, and it's because there's something about it that's a little bit more, needs a little bit more heightened control, which is why I think it goes to the quasi-judicial, just like the Board of Adjustments do for variance to code, or, you know, cutting down a specimen tree or some of those things. Unfortunately, I guess from the Board of Adjustments, they don't go to the council. It stops at Board of Adjustment. That is the approval or denial body.
The Board of Adjustment process, and Mike, keep me honest here, is you present your case and whatever Board of Adjustment rules one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
If the applicant does not get a favorable ruling in the Board of Adjustment,
They can appeal to the council, sure.
No, it appeals to Superior Court.
Okay.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting question. So with the current processes, workflows, it is if the city council now, in this case, of special use permits would they be escalated to, if the applicant did not get a favorable hearing from city council in a quasi-judicial, council could be escalated to Superior Court.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, the appeal would be to, yeah.
That would be correct.
So, you can ask, yeah,
All
because
right.
we're still, just for process, we're
Mr.
still
Mr.
talking.
Satterfield, just from a procedural, legal mechanics of the city of Wilmington, if, looking at this chart, flow chart, could you, under special use permit process on the left of the screen, after public notice, could Board of Adjustment be slipped in there? And then, pending Board of Adjustment recommendation, and then go to City Council to have, some layer of public hearing before it gets to council?
Any kind of change of that nature, I think, would require a related amendment to the code. And I don't think they could just declare that that's the way it's going to be.
So you're saying it is possible with an amendment, perhaps?
I would have to
Yeah.
research that, but I think
Commissioner Coffer,
Yep.
that would be similar to what the previous process was when this board made a recommendation. The quasi-judicial hearing is supposed to be made on the evidence presented at that meeting and at that meeting only. That's why we removed the Planning Commission from the recommending board, because the recommendation that would be meaningless because they're supposed to make that decision based on the evidence presented at that meeting. That's why the staff does not make a recommendation on those quasi-judicial cases either. So adding the Board of Adjustment would just be a layer that, they couldn't even consider what the Board of Adjustment recommended because it's supposed to be made at that meeting based on the evidence presented.
So that therein lies the root of the procedural question. If that's the case, then if it's going to stay quasi-judicial, it's got to land on that desk and be decided at that desk. And if that right now is the city council, then that's just the way that it's going to be. Unless you switch it to legislative, is what I'm understanding.
Is that process mandated by state code, or is that a city-adopted process?
there is a state statute applicable to appeals of quasi-judicial decisions.
But in terms of the flow that says, I'll give you a hypothetical. Let me just jump in here. What happens if we as a city said, we want I know this is way out there, but we say as a city, we want the Planning Commission to hear these special use permits before they go to City Council. Could the city say, okay, I'm going to enable the Planning Commission to hold a quasi-judicial hearing? Or again, does the state code allow one entity inside the city to do that?
I'm not sure that you could have multiple quasi-judicial hearings.
And that's exactly where I'm going.
The statute speaks in terms of appeals of quasi-judicial decisions, and the Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial decision. Design Adjustment Commission, same way.
So
The county handles it differently.
I'm sorry?
The county handles it differently.
Okay, how does the
They
county
go in
handle
front
it?
of commission, the planning commission,
For a special use permit?
but there's not a vote. Public is there.
Okay.
They let them speak. They offer advice, but there is no vote. Just went through one.
So what's the purpose of that then? Because if.
You got the public there.
No, but
They
hear me
present.
out, hear me out.
Commissioners, I'm going to need to ask you guys to please still speak into your mics
Got
as
it.
if you're speaking to the public and not each other. Thank you.
Okay. Livian, here's my question, and I know you like you say, you're just there. I'm trying to understand from a workflow standpoint, then what's the purpose of in that case, of the Planning Commission hearing that discussion? Because how soon, if that's considered a part of the step in a that's ultimately becomes quasi-judicial, where does the ex parte discussion, where do they end in that process?
I didn't know there was a different process until we got into all these discussions.
Okay.
But there's no vote, there's no judgment. The residents were allowed to speak. They were reminded that when it goes to the commissioners, that they needed to have expert testimony in these different fields.
Okay.
The applicant is paying for, and also the special use permit, you've got to go a lot further in your drawings and specifications.
There's a level of precision that's a lot
Yes.
A lot greater.
And it's very costly.
Okay.
And every one of your professional people
Mhm.
has to be there.
Yeah.
But my perception of it is that the community was there. They were able to talk. They had, but it was limited time.
Sure.
It wasn't any more limited than ours, I don't think. But it was interesting. I don't know their internal procedures with it or why they're different than the city.
You actually have saved me. I was going to ask, does anybody have any knowledge of what the county does? So this is good input. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Commissioner Lennon.
Well, there's your public participation. I mean, right there.
when Holly Tree was supposed to come to us,
Twice.
and then they didn't? Well,
They had
because I had just
had
done
two
this-
continuances and then a withdrawal.
Right.
Yeah.
But they went straight into the special use permit and didn't have to go that route. So you can rewatch it if you want to.
No, I was there.
I've watched no, I'm talking about the county one.
Oh, the county one, no, okay.
But no, I watched the 4-hour one.
Anything else of the applicant before we go to for a public hearing? Okay, then I'm going to open the public hearing, and anybody that wishes to speak in favor of or against this, please come forward. And please state your name.
My name's Dan Bailey. I live at 111 Myrtle Avenue. That's the old Seagate subdivision.
Okay.
I had a lot of things I was going to say before I came up here, and then I listened to you guys. And I got to say, it's very disheartening listening to some of you. It's sad that there's nobody here. And you know why? It's because of discussions like this. Everybody says, well, why bother coming? It's become a pay-to-play process. This gentleman over here said, well, they can just bring their expert witnesses. Do you know how much that costs? I don't have some Chinese developer behind me to help me fight for, what may be happening in little old Seagate over there. I don't know about these big, I guess you're talking about the bridge stuff, and I don't know about those big things, these big high-profile things. I'm talking about what happens in our little neighborhoods, and when I tell people, sometimes people will ask me, because I come to a lot of these things, I think, since maybe 2008 or something, I got involved in the land development code way back then in Seagate. And people come less and less, and I'll say, well, why won't you come? Why won't you come? Well, why bother? It's all been paid for already. And when you talk about quasi-judicial, that's what everybody thinks of. It's already been paid for. It's pay to play. Oh, and I've been to a lot of these big meetings too, and I know there's some loons who talk for hours and hours. Stuff that's way offhand. I know that. I sit through it. You all can sit through it too. I was surprised that this even came up when I saw this come across my email, because it's a very lucrative process. It seems like a lot of people get hired to come and speak for these developers, and usually the same people over and over and over again. To represent these developers that are flooding the area. It's also called an argument by authority. Evidentiary hearings require standing, it says. Most of the time a resident who's lived in the neighborhood for 32 years has a more intimate knowledge of the situation that's going on with the land than the expert with some data he collected under the employee of some entity requiring the special use. You read as far as your mission statement, anyone who wishes to speak may do so. That was what this gentleman said in the beginning. And that doesn't allow that. The special use permitting and the quasi-judicial does not allow that. Participating is not just sitting back there. That's not participating. That's being a lump on a log. Participating is being able to come up here and argue a point, maybe say something that the quote-unquote experts have lied about, or that the experts don't know about, or that you all don't know about, because you don't live in every single little neighborhood in this town. I was really glad, I received this, I was really glad to read it, and I said to myself, there's something wrong here. There's got to be a catch. And I read this thing over and over and over, looking for the little catch, because it was just too good to be true. You mean they're going to let us speak again? They're going to give us a little bit of power back, you know, the people who actually pay the taxes around here? And that's why I came up to talk in favor of it. I took time out of my time, you know, and if it passes, then I'll be able to turn to those people and say, well, why bother going? I said, well, because it's no longer that. It's no longer quasi-judiciary. It's no longer pay to play. You know, and maybe more people will come. And it may take a little bit longer, but you know, what's that saying, that the wheels of government are supposed to turn slowly so that mistakes aren't made? You know, and I just wanted to speak in favor of this, and I'm glad that staff came up with this. You know, it gives a little bit of hope anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, seeing nobody else coming forward, we will close the public hearing, and are there any other discussion points here? Any other suggestions?
Chair,
Yes,
excuse me.
yes.
I don't think there were any opposing comments.
There were no comments. Yeah,
Anyone else?
yeah, there's nobody else.
Okay,
So,
sorry for
thank
the
you.
interruption.
No, you're good. Commissioner Kofer.
Mr. Chair, I'll just, jump in. I'm not sure if, again, which path is more palatable. I just know that the council deserves some type of screening committee. I would want that. I do think the public deserves, that dress rehearsal too, because it's not just the applicant, but it's the opposition or the support that has an opportunity to, to get their pitch right and then go, refine that and get back in front of council when it's the real deal, and the vote matters. When I look at the table of uses, can you go back to the table of uses, Brian? I mean, again, when we parse this table of uses, these are the very few that are not either permitted by right to a property owner or allowed as a conditional use that can be approved at the administrative level. And, zoo, okay, yeah, zoo, I get it. You can't just go to staff and get a zoo in your backyard. We need a little bit of, we need a little more oversight there. But they're all so just specific. They're so uncommon. They're so unusual. And the majority of the S's are just simply falling in the historic district, where again, we overlay more rules and regulations for everything with the historic district, especially with the structures. So I understand that. And when we exclude the historic district, we're down to 13 uses. And I don't know, I guess I think it's if staff thinks that conditional zoning is the best workflow path to achieve some layer of public hearing prior to this reaching council. I just don't see anyone losing anything here. That's what I'm getting at. I don't see the public losing. I don't see the property owner losing. I don't see, if I was a tenant, say Commissioner Lennon owns a property and I'm a tenant and I'm trying to open a library, I don't see me as a tenant losing in any of that.
May I ask you clarification? You said you don't see anybody losing. Anybody losing by the way it is today or losing by the proposal?
I don't see any loss by this proposal to the public, to the private property owner, to the hypothetical potential business owner, because I've been, again, unabashed at supporting commercial services and businesses in this city. And I can't see any of those groups, and I think that covers everyone, and I think it helps the elected official who is the most accountable for everything in the city. I think, as far as we're concerned, we're duty bound to the citizens of Wilmington, and I think the citizens are protected here. So with this proposal, I would be in favor of it. I mean, unless there's some other objection that I'm just not seeing. I respectfully just disagree with some of the comments that it needs to stay quasi-judicial. I don't agree with that. But I'm okay if you want it to go quasi-judicial, but it sounds like legally we cannot achieve that layer of vetting that I think the council deserves, you know? And I think that the applicant and the proponents in opposition deserve that chance too, to just, I mean, it's different from the dais versus the lectern. You know, when you're at that level and you're speaking, you know, you kind of need that, I mean, not to disrespect the process, but that dress rehearsal before you get to the big show at council. So again, I think this proposal is fair, and I would be in favor of it, but I'll, you know, keep an open mind as we go through opinions.
Commissioner Woodruff.
In short, I agree with Ace. If we're being asked to vote on this as this proposal, I'm in favor of it. The discussion seems to be, is it the right thing to do? And there may be some middle ground. I don't like it when city council kind of feeds it back to us and throws it in our lap. Like I say, if this vote's coming up right now, I'm voting for it. It's got to go to city council. They may not like it when it gets there, but they may have heard enough tonight to know they're going to send it back to staff and go halfway. I mean, like Brian said, this is the recommendation of staff. It came from council to take a look at it. If there's a better way to do it, I don't think we're in a position right now to decide what that is. I mean, I've heard enough of people saying save this, save that. And so be it. I'm ready to vote to say yes, send this baby on, and if they don't like it, send it back to staff to work out those details. Personally, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's perfectly fine. I agree with Ace. I don't see any loss in this. Obviously, it's come from council. It's got some rough edges because of what happened already. But if there's a middle ground, that's great, but not tonight. Not with this group, not with what's going on, that we don't have information, time. We don't have staff's input for a middle ground. My guess is they weren't asked to come up with a middle ground. So anyway, that's where I'm standing.
Commissioner Lennon.
I agree with everything you just said, and that's why I'm going to vote against it. Because I think, nothing personal to anybody on staff, but I don't think a lot of thought went into this. And I don't think a lot of legal research went into this. And I don't think, to Commissioner Woodruff's point, I don't think any research into a better alternative went into this. Maybe I'm wrong, but it didn't get presented tonight. So for those reasons, and that's why I said to Brian multiple times, as presented, I don't agree with this.
So I'd ask my colleagues, is there an alternative we ought to consider? I mean, I've heard from Commissioner Woodruff says as presented, let's move on. I've heard from Commissioner Kofer. I've heard from Commissioner Collier that says there's a middle ground somewhere. I think your position is to make sure.
I mean, I think the standardization of process is actually a good thing. Including more voices, regardless of whether they're, qualified as experts, I don't see any issue or problem with that. I mean, there's nothing that disqualifies experts from coming. I mean, we've been in conditional zoning hearings where the opposition groups have hired attorneys. They've hired urban planners. So there's nothing that prevents experts from being included in the conditional zoning process. I agree with Ace that having multiple layers of public venues for vetting, to me, adds more transparency, right? It's just more touch points for the public to be heard and to talk. There are other methods, whether they're prescribed conditions, Board of Adjustments. Hearing tonight to me that land use is really sort of at the crux of this, and if there are dimensional things that need consideration, there's other ways that can still happen. So I think that this is, creating one sort of role, one sort of method for this makes a lot of sense to me.
Commissioner Jones, any final comments? I'll just kind of sum this up, and then I think we need to move to Commissioner Collier, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, one question, and I'll quit belaboring this point. If all the S's went to CZ, are all the prescribed conditions that are in addition to the special use permit, do they go away or do they stay in the code?
None of those conditions would change. It would just be the process by which the use is allowed.
So it's still under prescribed conditions?
The prescribed conditions that exist today will still exist, whether it's an S or a CZ.
Okay. No. Personally, and I think I've said it, I don't think that replacing special use permit with CZ is really the best option. I think there's something in the middle. I do support making the process better and making the process more smooth. I don't think that throwing out the baby with the bathwater all the time is the right way to go. I think there's some options in making some S's, some C's. And quite honestly, I'm sure there are some that should go to CZ. But, I'm never truly in favor of just throwing everything out. I did try to make some offer of the middle ground, whether it works or doesn't work, and Ron, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We don't need to debate what that's going to be in this setting today. If there is a middle ground, it will have to be dealt with. The staff has got it vetted much more thoroughly than what we could do here tonight. I think from a matter of pragmatism, I would vote in support of the motion tonight because one thing that we've all said is the transparency is kind of the key. If we want public input, we've got to allow public input. However, I still think SUP is not the worst thing in the world, or having a quasi-judicial hearing is not the worst thing in the world. Having public input is good, though. So I would support the transparency side. I could support the motion as it's presented by staff. Can't say I'm in love with it, but I would support it.
Yeah, and I guess my position is to looking at this, trying to do what is the best for the city overall, based on what we know, what we have, it's probably, I'm going to support this, that we need to move this forward, so.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in for one more
Yes, you
question?
can. Yes, absolutely.
It's a question I had, and I just haven't asked. So with uses, we're normally talking about a business owner, a tenant, some temporary use. With zoning, we talk about what runs with the land. When we go and we take uses and we kind of collide them with zoning, will that use run with the land? So let's use my hypothetical. I'm a tenant. Commissioner Collier owns a piece of property. I want to lease his property. I want to put a library on it, and he needs to come with his property through the process, and he's going to get a conditional zoning so that I, his tenant, can have a library. What happens 2 years from now when my library closes and he still owns this property with a conditional zoning for library? What happens then?
Well, let me start by saying the use would run with the land with a special use permit as well. So that permit, once you construct the library by special use, that runs with the land. So in either case, you'd have to come back and go through another special use permit process or another rezoning process to modify that.
Okay, well, I did not understand that piece to the Wilmington procedure. So when we go under the current policy with SUP, my library is built and it's running with the land. How does that affect me legally as a property owner? I mean, anybody could tell me what, I don't know. I can't see that in my mind.
I don't know that I have an answer to that.
Well, see, so I'm just going back to property owner, property rights. Does this hurt or help that group? But But if the SUP is already running with the land, then it's probably moot, and it equals out, so. Sorry, talking out loud to myself, but Brian's part of this.
Commissioner Lennon.
Last thing I'll say, so the vote can go ahead and happen, but I'm being blunt. It's ironic to me that every one of you has said, this is probably not the way to do it, but you're going to vote for it. And I do not think this is a good attempt to replace the special use process by just eliminating it. I think we are setting ourselves up for problems.
Well, then I will challenge in the following. I mean, we've kind of all stated where we're at. Before we go to a vote, there's always the opportunity that says that we send this from right here, send this back to the staff and ask them to look at the 13. That is an option. But I've not heard that. I've not heard that brought forth by anybody. So, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I'll make a motion right now that we ask staff to revisit this issue with more detailed explanations of the prescribed uses and the process that makes it transparent in the code as to what those prescribed uses are. Help me out if I'm missing something here. That ensures public participation, because I'm not against public participation, but in no way diminishes a property owner's rights today under the special use permit process.
I'm not sure I understand what you just said.
Bring us a better alternative.
Okay.
I mean, that's where I fall out, is please bring us a better alternative. This, to me, is not well thought out. And I can't vote for something that's not well thought out. And so, I mean, I've talked to multiple attorneys in the last 24 hours who all give me different answers as to where this falls. And so I don't know, I want to do the right thing, but this to me is not right. So I would make a motion that this item be continued to ask staff to come back with a more thorough explanation of the need for this and a process that is more transparent within the land development code. And I welcome any edits to my motion in the spirit of continuing the item.
Prior to a second, just to add more discussion, I mean, Mr. Chambers mentioned, which I think a lot of municipalities do, they model off of other cities and towns, and we had maybe reached out to Charlotte, and then Commissioner Jones mentioned that perhaps the county has a different process, and if a continuance or, a revisit, it doesn't seem like these come up all that often, so I don't know if it's a huge rush to change it tonight. Maybe it's worth the exercise to get some more modeling from different cities as to how they handle it. I don't know. Just that's a discussion piece at that point.
Okay, we have a motion on the table, and I would modify your motion. Okay? I'd put a time limit on it that says that if we were to continue, I could support a continuance that says at our next meeting, this gets decided, one way or the other. I don't think the city's going to come to a screeching halt, if we put this off, keep putting it off. But I mean, I understand the need. We all want to do the right thing. I haven't heard anybody here say anything other than we're all trying to figure out what the right thing is. I in jest shared with a couple of folks, in my effort to do due diligence. Okay, the comment I got was, well, what's the right answer? And my response to that is always, I don't know. We're going to decide that tonight. Okay? I mean, it's just reality.
I hear you.
So I'm not trying to create work, but I'm also trying to respect the wishes of my peer commissioners. I mean, we clearly have, there's a, I mean, I'm sensing there's, okay, okay. I'm also hearing, like, not so quick, and And we have that opportunity here as a legislative body to say, hey, this is the approach I'd like to take. I mean, so that would be my modification that says this, I would modify that to say we give the staff the 30 days from this meeting, so what is it, May 2nd or whatever our next meeting is, and this is an agenda item, and we take this up and put it to bed one way or the other. Because I think we owe that to city council as well.
John, are you acceptable to that in your motion?
Absolutely.
All right, then I will second the motion as amended by you. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Comment. I don't mind doing this.
Yeah.
I just think that directive that you think we're giving to the staff should come from city council to staff and then back to us. We're going to go through talking to these folks, so they're going to go back and do something. They're going to come back to us. Then we still go to council. They got the ultimate ruling one way or the other. My gut tells me council wants this thing passed. Staff did the work of council's request, came up, and this is it. I don't feel comfortable us telling staff how to do what we don't even know what to do unless we have some more input from council.
I hear what you're saying, Ron.
And
I don't think we're directing staff. I think what we're asking is we all agree that there's something wrong with that process.
Well,
so to solve it, I mean, we need the experts to solve it.
I agree.
And
I mean, it's going to get to council whichever way we went if we
you're
follow
you're
the
correct.
motion.
And I don't think council told staff, get rid of SUP, and that's all I'm going to take. I think council said, I want you to look at it and evaluate it and come back with an option.
So let me ask a process question to city attorney. Because we've talked about this over the last couple of days. We could be in a position where the proposal that is brought forth by staff is not accepted, and we're talking about an alternative motion here. My question is does staff then, can they escalate a denial to city council? I mean, it would look pretty weird in the context of city process, but is that even possible?
I think they could. I think if you denied, they could move it that way.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I heard this said multiple times by many of you, dry run, sort of the dress rehearsal. That was this tonight. And so even if our quote unquote recommendation is to continue and to request staff to come back with something more comprehensive, and council chooses to move ahead, I'm fine with that. That's their prerogative. I may not agree with it, but that's their prerogative. But at least we've said, and I think anybody watching the tape is going to get the impression that, okay, generally speaking, maybe this is okay, but we'd like more comprehensive information about it. So,
Two, that we're assuming that all of council is for this, and
that's a fair statement.
I think the discussions that we've had tonight, we've learned, and I have had conversations with two. So I think them, like John said, them hearing us and the points that are coming up, they'll listen to that. Same thing when they have their meeting, that it's not that we're totally against it. It's so, talking to attorneys, it's so broad, and we start getting into the downzoning risk. So I think we need to do our due diligence, and I'm sure they will too.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Commissioner Adams?
If we are asking to send this back or for a continuance, I mean, I think we need to be, clarity is kindness, right? So just saying, bring us back something more comprehensive. I don't know what that means if I'm staff. Like, if we want specific, different, more, whatever it is, I think we should be prepared to tell them what it is we're looking for and expecting, as opposed to being more vague of, we just want something different or more comprehensive. Because if I was on staff, I wouldn't exactly know what that meant.
And I agree, we need to direct it. But every one of these S's have prescribed conditioned in the code today. It's already there. It's already written in. The only exception to that is you got to go tell city council what you want to do, and they vote for it. That is the addition to it. You still got to do all the other stuff. So if we changed every one of these things to Cs, we still have to do the same things, you just don't ask council. So what the proposal is to take it to, it's going to council, to planning commission, to council, everybody's going to go through it, we're going to look at it as if it's a rezoning. That's where I say it's too, that to me is a big step, just to take out what has been the right for a while. There's a reason why this was left in the rewrite of the code, because we spent a long time rewriting the code. Is this perfect? No. But there's somewhere in the middle, and what I would ask staff to do, in my opinion, is go back and look and say, okay, which one of these are ones that we could live with as prescribed conditions only, make it a C. There are others that are going to need to be CZ, no doubt in my mind, but there are some in here that may not have to be, and that's what I want to see, is that list, not just wholly you put everything into a special use permit. Into a conditional zoning. That's what I mean by let's come with the middle ground. I think that's my recommendation.
Are we having a discussion of, I'm reading this, 22 special uses, 9 are exclusive to the, to the historic district. So if you took that, is this entire discussion about 13?
Pretty much.
It is.
So
It's about 4 cases in 3 years.
I get that. To put it into context, that's exactly. But I think the other thing is there's been enough discussion. We've all gotten feedback. Okay, we can sit here and talk about. We've talked to different council members. Getting their perspective. We can all lawyers spent the day on the phone with attorneys. We can all bring it to the table, and I think we have as appropriate. I would offer this amendment, John. This add-on. I added a time frame, and tell me if we can get our heads around, if you take the 9 historic district items off this, go back and tell me which ones, what are the other ones that can be moved to out of special use to something else, and let's put that proposal in front of the city council.
I was more comfortable with your first modification.
I liked it too.
Just being personally. And to Commissioner Adams' point, that's a valid point, but for me, I can rattle off 3. I would like to hear a clear understanding of the legal precedent that hopefully we're not setting in this with the downzoning legislation. I'd like to hear if, forgive me, I think you said Charlotte did it. How'd they do it? Did they do it the same way? Did they just one day do away with SUPs and go to conditional? Or did they do it in a complete rewrite of the code? Surely if they've done it, they've addressed some of these issues before. And then lastly, I don't remember what the third one was, but it was really good.
Sound like Rick Perry now.
I'm sorry, I do remember, is to maybe look at what does, and I'm just looking at surrounding municipalities. How do they handle this situation, and what are maybe some lessons we could learn, good or bad, from them on the process that help ensure public participation, property owners' rights. There's a balance there for all of those things. So those would be the 3 that I could think of right off the top of my head.
And that last one would be on my request list, would be modeling from other communities, and perhaps if this option that's on the table tonight remains number 1, or maybe after a little further review there's option 1 or 2. But I think what I'm hearing is more or less that the commission, who has only had this for 6 days or 7 days, the packet, a lot of our colleagues here need more time as well to process and to research it. So I'm probably still with Commissioner Woodruff on this. I could vote for it tonight and send it on. But if it pleases the commission and the chair, I'm very happy to continue it with the direction that I think John just articulated.
So I guess what I'm looking for, you're okay with the microphone? You're okay with the modification that puts a time limit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. is there any specific language, Richard, that we ought to add to that in terms of, because your point is right. I mean, if I'm Brian, I'm sitting here, it's like, what in the hell do you want me to go look at? So are there?
I think the language that we asked for was some more information on how the other areas are doing it. I know they looked at Charlotte, maybe there's some others, to find out what that process is. I mean, we need to get the process right if we're going to do it. I don't want to just do it knee-jerk at this point.
Can I summarize?
Please do.
What you said was very helpful, John, about just some guidance and specifics. So a better understanding of legal precedent, right? What did Charlotte do as a case study? Conformance or, what are our peers or neighboring communities doing? And then the fourth one that I think that you mentioned was some better consideration, more detail around specific uses relative to the table itself. Those are the four things that I kept hearing, that if we send this back to staff, we sound like we're looking for the most information on. So I think we should specifically guide them that way.
So modified.
So what's the motion?
I love architect. That was great.
What's that?
Architect, that was great.
I think if I could just echo what Commissioner Adams said with the request that this be continued to next month, with a specific request that the 4 items that Commissioner Adams just recited be included in the presentation in May.
I need to ask a process question that just occurred to me. Do we have to vote on we've got agenda item number 3. It sounds like we'd have to vote to not accept it and then entertain his motion? Is that how we'd have to do it?
I think the motion on the floor is to continue.
That's right.
Okay, so
Subject to
I just want to make sure, so I don't have to go to the sheet and we don't have to do anything with this. We have a motion that supersedes this. Okay, I just want to be sure on the process. You all right with that?
I am perfectly fine with that, thank you.
So I haven't written this down, so Brian, Amy, have you guys been keeping notes on what this motion is?
We're taking notes and you're being recorded.
Understand. So I guess then having said that, we have a motion on the table brought forth by Commissioner Lennon. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Collier, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. With that, let's move off the agenda. Are there any other items from the commission? No? Okay. Any items from the staff?
Got a couple things.
Yeah.
You have a calendar in your packet with some recommended or requested changes. We are trying to get out of the way of the move that will take us from here to 929 North Front. And we've been informed that they need 3 weeks to move the equipment here, get everything set up there so we can start rolling. We're trying to get out of the way and have 2 or 3 options for that to occur. So we're proposing, and give me 1 second, I'll pull the calendar up. We're proposing to adjust your meetings in July and September to provide 3 options for a 3-week period for which that transfer can take place. And give me a second, I'll pull up the calendar. So the first change in July would be to align with council's only meeting in July that week. Council only has 1 meeting in July. It would be the third Tuesday. So we would ask that the meeting that is currently scheduled for July 2nd be moved to the 16th. That way you'd have the 3 weeks before and after for the moves to potentially take place. And then in September, council has already moved their meeting to the 2nd week in September. We would ask that the commission consider moving your meeting to that same week from the 3rd to the 10th. That way there'd be a 3-week window prior to that as well for that move to take place.
We have an ask on the table to adjust calendars. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
The only other item I have is the update from last night. The council did approve the Land Development Code Amendment to provide the exception for height for the hospitals.
Right. Okay. Anybody? Anybody else? You guys? Okay, I need a motion to adjourn. Have a motion made, need a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. We are adjourned.